Willow Grove Park. I think we'll just sort of jump right into it. The park was built because of the trolley. And the way the trolley came out this way is a fascinating story in and of itself. Prior to the electrification of trolleys, the way people were massed moved other than steam trains was horses pulled cars that carried multiple people. There were tracks in the ground, and the horses would pull the things up and down the street, primarily in Philadelphia. There was a lot of takers, and so there was great competition. And after a while, people started to get monopolies for specific streets. In the late 1880s and early 1890s, they devised a way to electrify those cars so that you no longer needed the horses. And with that, there was in Philadelphia a consolidation of what was called traction. The trolleys were called traction companies of the traction companies. The main traction company was the Philadelphia Traction Company that was controlled by those great duo of monopolists in the traction world, Peter A.B. Widener and William L. Elkins. Not all the lines wanted to join the monopoly that Widener and Elkins were putting together in the Philadelphia Traction Company, and so two other traction companies were formed. One was the Electric Traction Company, and the other was the People's. And the People's Traction Company wound up buying the People's Passenger Railway. So the primary purpose for the People's Traction Company was to hold the stock of the People's Passenger Railway. And the People's Passenger Railway had consolidated a number of lines, including they held the right for the line that ran up Old York Road. And that company, and it's a bunch of shells, and it's sort of like, I guess, high finances today that none of us understand, but it ruins our economy. And that is, you have all these shells and all these companies, and everybody's trading bonds back and forth, and some people are selling short, and it's before all the disclosure in the market, and so fortunes are made and lost. Widener's always did pretty well. So the Old York Road line was held by the Philadelphia, Cheltenham, and Jenkintown Passenger Railway. That merged in and became part of or rolled up into this People's Traction Company that was formed in 1893 with the express purpose of electrifying the line. Caleb Fox, I don't know if some of you might be familiar with his name. He basically owned all the ground. The Foxes were financiers and brokers. They owned all the ground where KI Synagogue is, Beth Shalom, sort of in Cheltenham, that whole east side of Old York Road. They had a whole series of houses that Frank Furness had built, and that's where they lived, and they were in the brokerage business. They wound up owning the Old York Road. They bought it from the Quakers, and they put the stock to the People's Traction Company so that they had the right to be able to build the line. I'm going to do a little of this history of the traction companies and get it out of the way so that we don't have to talk about it later on. Within a few months of the park being formed, so the People's Traction Company eventually buys ground, and then shortly after they buy the ground, and just as the park is beginning to develop, the three traction concerns decide that it's going to be cheaper if they all merge. And so the Union Passenger Railway Company is formed, and all three traction companies, the Electric, the People's, and the Philadelphia, all their stock rolls up into this Union Passenger Railway. This exists until 1902, when that company is sort of blown up and it's reconstituted as the Philadelphia Rapid Transit Company. This name will hold until 1940, when it probably takes on the more familiar, we know, the Philadelphia Transportation Company, the PTC. But that's sort of how you got to the PTC, and then in the late 60s, the PTC's concerns, which become all bus routes eventually, is bought out by SEPTA. And so that's sort of how this whole thing moves, and it becomes one of the branches of SEPTA's bus division, because SEPTA has multiple divisions for how they move people back and forth. So let's go back. Here's Old York Road, which is now Church Road. This is sort of right opposite the Wall House. The old Yorktown Inn is that construction site there where they're building the powerhouse. That was the Ogon's power station. But this is the laying of the track to Jenkintown. 1893, 1894, the winter of that time period. For those of you that are on Church Road and take the Old York Road spur up to where Beth Shalom is, that was the original route of Old York Road. It's now the spur, and then when they bought the Fox estate and basically blasted through the hill, which is how you traverse Old York Road nowadays. So this is a picture of them building the line to Jenkintown. That is a sketch of Caleb Fox, who was the brains behind this and the park up until its end of its second year. They were interested in Old York Road because they lived on it. This is a newspaper saying that the train comes to Jenkintown in January of 1895 with the People's Traction. 1895 in May, Decoration Day, they opened the line all the way up to Willow Grove. 10,000 people get off the trolleys that day because it's been highly touted, and the only thing for them to do is to walk across the street and go to the Mineral Springs Hotel. The Mineral Springs had been bought by Charles Ehrenfort in 1890. He renovated it sort of into a pleasure picnic grounds in 1892. And when he realized that the trolley was coming his way, he hired Horace Trumbauer to expand the building to its present dimensions, as you see in this photo, for 1895. And he had all these people coming in and day out, buying popcorn and candy. There was beer inside the restaurant, but not on the grounds. And Ehrenfort made a killing. Caleb Fox and the president of the People's Traction Company, J. Lober Welsh, they would come out every Saturday, and they were amazed that Mr. Ehrenfort, whom they called a gross-grained Dutchman, who wouldn't sell to them, was making all this money. And within a month or so of that, they started poking around for land. The Mineral Springs had dammed up the stream, had a 10-acre lake. It was a 30-acre property. Again, I'll just do a little more on the Mineral Springs and move on. This is the Mineral Springs after it was renovated in 1913. The building and the back portion that you see here becomes that underneath, and that was their restaurant. The Mineral Springs will change family ownership in 1926 and eventually be demolished in 1938. This is a wonderful picture. It's actually two pictures put together. It's an 1896 picture, but it gives us a little opportunity to talk about what's going on. This is Moreland Road, changed a little bit, yeah. We are looking east from the west. Here's the casino at the park, if you're familiar with that. The Mineral Spring, the trolley barn building is here, and the Mineral Springs would be over here. This ground is the Kemble farm. William Kemble owned the ground to the west of the park. And the ground that the Peoples bought, they bought 10 acres from John Cadwallader, which is the upper Moreland portion of Willow Grove Park. So it would be the ground that's right in here. And they bought from the William Newbold estate, they bought 89 acres on the south side of Moreland, which is in Abington Township, which is pretty much what is now constituted by the mall, as well as Crestmont Park on the other side of Welsh Road. All that was part of that tract. When you came to the park, we're standing on Old York Road. This is the old waiting room, and this is the great trolley shed where the trolleys would be housed. The interesting thing is the trolleys would loop the park and then come back to the shed. That's where they were birthed. The person who built the Reading Terminal also built this. This is a later picture in the 30s, but the building was not much changed from its beginnings. This is the entrance to Willow Grove Park. We're looking north on Old York Road. Easton Road would be coming in here somewhere. From Moreland to Old York Road, Easton Road was initially sort of a path through the park. It wasn't fully paved as a full road. That would happen in fairly short order, thus dividing the rail yard from the park portion of the park. As I said, the trolley looped around the perimeter of the park. And so we are standing, this is the Kemble Farm here. We're on the western side. The first lake is going to be over here, and you can see folks getting off the open-air trolley in the summer. There was various stops around the park where people could get on and get off, and that was the way to turn the trolleys around, and then they would head right back out. You can also tell a couple things. The designers of the park wanted to make it a very refined place to go. I've read the memoirs of Caleb Fox, which are totally fascinating. Originally, he had wanted to put a beer garden in, but Mr. Ehrenfort was successful in blocking that because he had a beer monopoly and he didn't want to share the wealth. That benefited the park because it was really touted as a place where unaccompanied women and children could go. And Fox writes that if they had had the beer, that would have not have been the case, and therefore the park would have not have been as successful as it was. So there was no beer. You can tell by the dress, everybody was expected to keep a certain level of decorum. That was enforced by the park guards, of which this is the original complement, -1. There were 17 in total. This is a photo of 16. The northern part of the park, the upper Moreland portion that's now where the Marshalls and the Barnes & Noble, that whole area, that is what this area looked originally when it was part of the park. You can see the pathways through here. Here's the trolley barn. That, I believe, is the Mineral Springs. It might not be. It'll be better in another picture. Great lands. Here we go. Mineral Springs is right there. That's the lodge building right at the entrance. They had lily ponds. It was sort of, they tried to make it like a Longwood Gardens, is the best way for me to describe it. This is a colored